Well, not till I go back to Harvard in the fall.
Oh, well, this is just for a speech next week. Well, how did the term go? What was your class standing?
Just fair. Well, mediocre, I suppose. I'm about 40th in the class.
What are we going to do about it?
I'll do better next term.
40th? Out of 85? I suggest immediate steps. 4 or 5 hours a day on your books, and I'll arrange for a private tutor. Well, as you can see, I'm preparing an address.
Yes, sir.
Hello, John. Oh.
Mary Catherine.
What did your father say?
He gave me my orders. I'm to spend the holiday studying.
That expression is so tragically tragic. I must do a drawing of you just that way. But now, you know, John, there's always a bright side if you look for it.
I'll be damned.
Thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone ever said to me.
This means you must go back to Washington soon.
I think the holiday is about over. I'm afraid we're going to be pulled into this Europeanness.
I hate to interrupt, but we must talk about George and Mary Catherine. They're waiting for an answer.
It's time for my afternoon rest anyway. We'll talk about this at dinner. Good.
All right. George wants to marry the girl. Do you approve or disapprove?
The decision will have to be made without me. I refuse to participate.
May I ask why?
Because George and John are both my sons.
Mary Catherine is a flirtatious little minx. We both know that. While George was away, she kept in practice by flirting with John. I can even remember her flirting with Charles. Why is this so important?
Because John's in love with her.
Does George know any of this?
Yes.
Well, then why the sudden proposal?
I think he thinks that a formal engagement would focus her attentions.
And you insist I make the decision. Well. George!
Please excuse me.
Ah, George, I have just one question. If we assent, when do you plan to marry?
When my financial situation warrants it, say 2 or 3 years.
In that case, I assent. So does your mother. Congratulations.
He said. They said yes.
George. Darling.
Well, it calls for a celebration. Doesn't it?
Ah, Mr. Secretary. You had time to study the British proposal.
I have read it.
And your first reaction?
If we should make a joint declaration with Britain, a declaration of non-intervention in South America, then we must be prepared to back it up. We would be saying, in effect, that should any European country seek to take power in South America, then neither the United States nor Britain would stand by with indifference. Now, in that last statement, I hear the rumble of war. Remember Washington's farewell warning that we should stay out of the ordinary vicissitudes of European politics.
Well, is it an ordinary vicissitude, and is it European? Our concern is that Spain will reach out to repossess Mexico and the independent countries of South America.
No, I do not believe that we face such an eventuality.
Well, the Secretary of War disagrees. He thinks that Spain could recover Mexico and the South American countries with but 10,000 men. Now, how do you feel about that?
I think Mr. Calhoun is perfectly moonstruck.
Well, permit me to introduce further testimony. I thought it wise to write to two old friends. Here, with the British power and navy combined with our own, we have nothing to fear. In the great struggle of this epoch between liberty and despotism, we owe it to ourselves to sustain liberty, in this hemisphere at least. That is signed James Madison. The other reply is from Mr. Jefferson, and he, too, thinks that we should join with Britain in making the statement.
Formidable weight of opinion. Presidents Jefferson, Madison, and Monroe.
Despite which weight of opinion, Mr. Adams seems unconvinced. Gentlemen. Now, as in our past meetings, the subject before this cabinet is the signing of the joint declaration with Britain.
It's clear to me that the will of this group,
The will of the majority of this group is to accept the British proposal.
Mr. President.
Mr. Adams.
An opportunity has presented itself for us to take an alternate method toward making clear to the world where we stand. The Baron von Thuil has delivered us a formal note on behalf of the Tsar of Russia. In brief, we are instructed to stay neutral toward South America. And if we do not, the Tsar and the rest of his allies will wield their might on the side of Spain.
Would not our joining with Britain in a declaration of non-intervention answer that?
Perhaps. However, the Russian note affords a very convenient opportunity for us to take an independent stand.
You are suggesting declining the joint declaration with Britain?
Yes. It would be advantageous for us to avow our principles directly to Russia and France, rather than come in as a cockboat in the wake of the British man of war.
Well, Mr. Adams, you made your point. I have no desire to be the cockboat in the wake of a British man of war. You will draft the note to the Baron von Thuil.
Yes, I will draft the note to Russia, England, France, and Spain. We must make it clear that henceforth the American continents are not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European nation.
Yes, but I do not intend to confine this statement merely to confidential diplomatic correspondence with the involved nations. This is a new chapter in our foreign policy. Let it be read as a presidential message to the Congress, to the people, indeed to the whole world.
A triumphant career as Secretary of State for John Quincy Adams, capped by his concept of foreign policy now known as the Monroe Doctrine. This same career included the acquisition of Spanish Florida and Spain's claims to the Oregon Territory, extending the United States border to the Pacific. It is also a period in which Louisa Catherine shines as a hostess, one whose invitations are much sought after. A grand ball at the Adams home, one of the social highlights of the season in 1824. A strange irony, for while influential people dance and gossip, Adams enters a new arena as contender for the presidency. His chief rival is the man whose own career Adams had saved.
General Andrew Jackson.
Mr. Adams? I see that all the most charming ladies in Washington are here tonight.
You flatter us, General, more than we deserve.
The occasion flatters me, madam, more than I deserve.
This way, General. The guests wait to greet you on the anniversary of your great victory at New Orleans.
Everyone is here except the president. Are you sure he's coming, Louisa?
President Monroe wanted to be scrupulously fair. He felt that his presence here in an election year might indicate a bias in Mr. Adams' favor.
Mr. Clay. Mr. Crawford.
General. Your arrival makes the evening complete, General.
Did you think I wouldn't arrive? Good God, man, I'm the guest of honor.
How goes the campaign, General?
Campaign? I'm a retired soldier, Mr. Crawford. Practicing law occasionally, but mainly retired out to grass on my plantation. I've only just returned to the Senate.
Somebody should have sent you the word, General. There's a presidential election in 11 months. And you're one of the leading candidates.
This is not a political occasion, Mr. Crawford.
Oh, I stand corrected, Mr. Adams. This is not a political occasion. However, before this year is out, one of the four of us will be the next president.
I plan no campaign. If the people are foolish enough to vote me into the White House, it'll be without exertion on my part.
I hold with the General. I will not solicit the nomination, nor will I lift a finger to support it.
You shame me, gentlemen. I, for one, want the presidency very much, and I intend to do my damnedest to get it.
Good luck to you, Mr. Crawford. My attitude, best expressed by Shakespeare, remains firm. If chance will have me king, why, chance may crown me without my star.
Too bad I'm not campaigning. I could accuse you of royalist leanings.
It's just possible, Mr. Adams, that the man who waits for chance to crown him may find himself bareheaded.
Oh, what a lovely, lovely evening. It's a shame George couldn't be here.
Do you mean that?
I don't know.
Charles, you look very nice, dear. A nosegay. Who's it for?
The flowers are from George. He wrote from Boston to that friend of his, Freddie. Freddie just delivered them.
To my fiancé.
What should I do?
Do as George intended. Deliver them.
Mr. Robert Letcher, representative from Kentucky.
Mr. Adams? I just got the electoral votes from Louisiana. Adams 2, Jackson 3. That makes the results final. Total vote for president, Clay 37, Crawford 41, Adams 84, Jackson 99. There we have it. Nobody elected. The first 3 will go to a vote to the House of Representatives, and Clay will be eliminated.
Eliminated strikes me as a somewhat imprecise word.
Isn't it? Seems like my friend Clay and his 37 votes are going to be the, well, let's just say that Mr. Clay is going to be mighty influential in deciding the outcome. Mr. Adams, what are your sentiments toward Clay?
Despite past differences, I harbor no hostilities.
Just by coincidence, he harbors no hostility toward you. Why, he's told one and all you're a man of real sincerity. Now, as we both know, Clay is not for Jackson. But back in Clay's home state of Kentucky, the folks in the legislature there, well, with Clay out, they'll want Jackson.
Yes, I see.
Of course, it could be solved. Mr. Clay is so popular back there, I'm sure he could change their minds if he had a good enough argument.
What would be the nature of the argument, Mr. Letcher?
Well, now, suppose we could tell him Clay would hold an influential position in your administration.
How influential?
Let's say as influential as your position in Monroe's administration. Mr. Clay wants you to know that he'd welcome a conversation with you on public affairs. Confidential, of course.
Whenever it suits Mr. Clay's convenience.
Have you seen these terrible things they're saying about you? John, I can't stand all these false accusations. I feel ashamed, degraded.
Well, I'm afraid you'll have to put up with it. Have you any idea of what I'm putting up with? Those men out there, all of them seeking political favors as the price of supporting me? Now, how many times have you heard me say that I wouldn't lift a finger, wouldn't campaign, wouldn't run for any office?
I do not keep count.
Yes, well, people say I'm running now. Running up every back alley of the political world. Cutting corners, making compromises, being evasive, doing everything but remaining true to the principles that I have lived by.
Is it worth it?
I believe that what I'm doing, I do for the country.
Mr. Clay, sir.
Send him in.
And as I've said publicly, my personal preference among the candidates is for you.
Word hadn't reached me.
Well, I have said publicly that I'm dead set against General Jackson. He would put his region and his state before the interests of the nation. He would destroy everything you've worked for. Despite our past differences, I find myself much more in sympathy with your views, Mr. Adams.
I am gratified, Mr. Clay.
Before lending my support, however, I feel we should discuss some principles of public importance.
I understand.
Without any personal consideration for myself, of course. But friends of Mr. Crawford have approached me in a most indiscreet manner.
Excuse me one moment.
Bargains and politics at times are synonymous, particularly when a presidency is at stake. History does not record the details of Mr. Adams' conversation with Mr. Clay, but subsequent to their private meeting, Clay lent his support to Adams' cause.
Recent election of a president of the United States, no person having received a majority of all the votes of the electors appointed, the choice having consequently devolved unto the House of Representatives, that House, proceeding in the manner prescribed by the Constitution, did this afternoon choose John Quincy Adams to be President of the United States for 4 years, commencing on the 4th day of March next.
Would Mr. Adams care to respond?
Mr. Webster. Gentlemen, I beg leave.
Sit down, Mr. Adams. Whatever you have to say, say it from a comfortable position.
I will stand.
He's going to decline.
On only one previous occasion in the history of our country has the House of Representatives been called upon to choose a president. I beg leave of the committee to avail myself of the precedent set by Mr. Jefferson at that time in reply in writing. I need hardly say, and yet I feel I must say, that if there were any immediate opportunity for the people and the people themselves to form and to express a nearer approach to unanimity, I would not hesitate to decline this office and submit the decision to the people. But the Constitution itself has not so disposed of the contingency which would arise in the event of my refusal. Therefore, I shall repair to the post assigned to me by the call of my country.
That duty was to be shadowed throughout Adams' presidency by the towering and popular figure of Andrew Jackson. It had been on February 9th, 1825, that the House of Representatives on its first ballot elected John Quincy Adams the 6th President of the United States by a majority of 1 state. It was a clouded victory, beset with doubts, unanswered questions.